Do you like cake? Do you like bombs? Well, what if I told you we can combine the two of those into making cake grenades in ROBLOX Studio? So, a wise man once told me, or some guy somewhere in some place in this world, where he said, with great power comes great responsibility. And so I learned scripting. And with that, I've learned how to do many, many things. However, what I choose to do with that knowledge and power is by making toilet guns and making bombs out of random objects. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make ones out of cake models. So let's get right into it. So first thing you're going to want to do is grab a model that is, well, a cake, right? I mean, it's not a cake grenade if it's not a cake. So I grabbed this model. I just found it off the toolbox. I just typed in cake under the model section. I found this little cake mesh thing. So that's what I'll be using as our weapon of destruction. So we do have a volunteer as well. I named him Bob. He will be assisting us today in exploding a lot. All right, so back to the cake. How do we even get started, right? How do we make this thing blow up? Well, first off, we need to make it a tool. And how do you make things a tool? Well, go into Workspace, hit the plus button, and type in tool. And there you will find the tool object, and just simply put the cake inside. It won't work just yet, though, because with ROBLOX tools, it always has to have a part called handle, which is what your character will be holding it by. So if it's a sword, you want to make sure your handle part is actually where the handle is, and if it's a gun, is where the trigger is, you know, whatnot. But in our case, our cake, we can hold it wherever we want, and we're just going to make it the cake in general. And afterwards, just put it in starter pack. And then just name it cake, just so in our hotbar, it'll show up as cake. Awesome. Just look at that. We are now holding a piece of cake that can do anything we would like it to. All right, so let's get into the scripting portion of things. But just before we do that, we got to think about how this is actually going to work, right? So how I want this to work is when the player clicks, it'll throw the cake, and when it touches somebody, it explodes, right? So how do we make a projectile? Well, you need to give the game something to handle as a projectile, in which case I'm just going to copy our handle, which is our cake mesh, rename it cake, and shove it into the server storage. So that will be the actual projectile we'll be using, and you'll be seeing how here in a second. So stuff the tool back into starter pack, and we're going to insert a local script right into the tool model. So there's going to be 3 events that we'll be handling inside the local script. And it's going to be script.parent, which is our tool, because script, parent. We're going to be using the equipped event, so it'll fire every time a player equips the tool. We also want an unequipped event as well, which will trigger when the player puts the tool away. But then we also want an activated event, which detects every time a player clicks their mouse, mainly the left click, while the tool's out. But just for security purposes, we're going to set 2 variables. We're going to have a debounce. We're going to set it to false. And we're going to have a variable called equip. And that's going to be false for now. When they equip it, equip will become true. And when they unequip it, equip will become false. Okay, now when they click it first, we want to use an if statement. So if equip is equal to true, then it's going to be able to do what we want. And first we want to make sure to actually have it equipped, right? We don't want it firing for no reason if we unequip the tool. All right, so we can create the object from the player to local client side of things. However, I tend to like to have the server handle all of that, mainly due to safety concerns. So what we're going to do is actually create a remote event here in replicated storage, and we're going to name it throw cake. And that's going to be it. So if equip is true, we're going to reference it with game.replicatedStorage.throwCake, and we're going to fire server. But there's an issue with this. Every time they click this and equip will be true, it's going to fire this event 1,000 times, however many times they click their button, which can basically burn out the event and stop it from working. So this is where the debounce comes in, also known as a cooldown. So first, an additional requirement before we fire everything is we want to make sure that dbounce is equal to false. So that way, is it equipped? If that's true, and it is not on cooldown, then it'll fire the event. But we're also going to set dbounce to true, so that way, when you do click it, the cooldown activates, and the second portion will not be true, meaning this event will not fire until after the cooldown's over. And how do we do that? We do a test.wait, and then we just set dbounce to false. So it'll wait a second, then it'll turn off the cooldown. Pretty simple. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'll be more than happy to explain how all this works if it's a little confusing. So now that we fired a server, we have to have a server listening out for this throw cake event, right? Because right now we just fired a massive signal out for any server script to listen out for. So let's make one. In server script service, make a server script, and we're going to go ahead and lead it with game.replicatestorage.throwcake on server event. So now it's going to receive that signal from our remote event. And it always passes who sent that signal, so we can always get the player's name of who sent it. Awesome. Now, this is where we get to make the object. So there's a neat little function called clone within ROBLOX Studio in which it does exactly as it says it does. It clones an object. So let's make a variable. We're going to call it thrown cake. And we're going to go ahead and reference it. We've shoved it in server storage. It's called cake, and colon, clone, open, and close parentheses. We've now cloned it, but now we need to tell it where to put this clone. And we're going to parent it to game.workspace. But then we also want its position to equal the player's position, right? So let's actually make an additional variable up here. It's going to be called character. And then we're going to set that as player.character. Then on top of that, we're going to say thrown cake .cframe, and if you do not know what cframe is, it is basically the position and rotation of an object. So we're going to set this the same as our player's rotation and position, so that way it spawns where we're at and not in some random other space in the game. So how do you set a cframe? Well, first you grab what cframe you're trying to alter, and you want to equal it to another cframe.new. This will create a new coordinate in which we're going to assign it to, and in which case we want to actually assign it to character humanoid root part. This way it's also compatible with R15 or R6, because both, no matter what, have a humanoid root part. So we're going to find that position and we're going to set it to that. But it also searches for a vector3, which is just the position. So we're going to finish it off with dot position. But then we also don't want it to spawn exactly in our player because it'll cause collision issues. So we're going to actually add an additional vector3 with vector3.new. And basically, you can tinker around with these numbers. So by default, 0, 0, 0. But do you want it above the player? You would alter the Y. Do you want it to the left or right of the player? You would alter the Z. But in our case, we want it to be a bit more forward. And -3... from my testing, actually worked very well. And you can experiment with these numbers, tinker with them, and see how they change where the cake spawns at. But in my case, -3 works perfectly for what I want it for. So let's go ahead and test this out. Let's hit the test button. I'm going to take the cake out. Well, I see. It spawns in front of me now. I don't know why it was being all weird before. But see, it doesn't work real well when you're walking around. But we're spawning cake. But it doesn't explode just yet. So, let's make this a little more exciting. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to give it a velocity. And what that means is that we're going to give it some speed. So that way it goes somewhere. It doesn't just spawn in and drop. It's going to fly outwards. So we're going to make a new object. We're going to make another variable. I call it BV because it's going to be a body velocity. And this thing is pretty cool because it basically applies a velocity to parts. And in my case, I want to parent it to the thrown cake. And so yeah, usually I set the BV dot max force to a new vector 3 value because it is a vector 3 value, and we're just going to use math.huge, and like it says here, for all three coordinates, for the x, y, and z. And another thing we want to do is set the velocity as well. So we're going to set the velocity, and it keeps spoiling the rest of this tutorial, isn't it? It just really loves doing that. So we're going to search for the humanoid root part. And we're going to check for the C-frame, meaning our position and rotation, and something called a look vector, which is a C-frame value, which basically it gets the position, the front face of a part, and wherever it's looking at. So in our case, our humanoid root part, the front of it would be in front of our character, right? So this part the velocity should be applied forward away from our torso. And all right, another thing I like to do is set the anchor to false, just in case it is. We do want can collide to be true. So that way it does detect collisions and it doesn't just go through things. But also we're going to use a service by using game get service debris. And what this does is it's like a cleanup service. So we're going to use the add item, and we're going to add our thrown cake item, and we're going to have it despawn after 2 seconds. That's all that does. So it's a good way to handle projectiles or anything you spawn in. If you want them to despawn after a while, a good way to handle this is using the debris service, adding the item into it, and telling it how long you would like it to last. And in my case, 2 seconds. So these will despawn after 2 seconds. So let's go ahead and test this out. If this works as intended, it's going to fly outward. Awesome. And you see how they despawn. You see the collisions are working. Makes them act all funny, but that's okay. Because what I also like to do is do test.wait. Make it about 0.1 seconds. Right, so what that does is exactly what it says it does. It destroys the body velocity. So both of these will become 0 because it doesn't exist anymore. So the object will fall instead of flying to infinity. Look at that. Now let's actually make this thing explode and kill things. So we're going to use thrownCake.touched. And it always returns what hits it. So first we want to make sure it's a player that it's hitting. So we're going to use hit.parent, find first child. Everything will have a humanoid if it is a player. Oh, and we also want to make sure that the name does not equal the player's name, our name, right? Because we don't want to blow ourselves up. So it's going to make sure that what it hits does have a humanoid and that it's not us, because we don't want to blow ourselves up. So we're going to make a new variable. It's going to be called explosion. And we're going to parent this to the object. And then we're going to set the explosion position to not us, but to whatever we hit. Their humanoid root part position. And I spelled humanoid wrong. Alright, so now whenever we throw this, and it hits him, well, that's not right, is it? So, because we put if the hit parent name is equal to our name, but we want to make sure that it is not equal to our player's name. See? Now I made them blow up. Let's make this explosion a little more complicated. And what I mean by that is we're going to shove this into a for loop. So, what exactly does this for loop do? Is it's going to run through this loop only once, but it'll run 3 times. So it's going to make 3 explosions, and that is it. It'll end the loop. Now, if I set this as 2, it's going to make a total of 6 explosions, right? Because it'll run through this loop once, so it'll make 3. It'll loop through it one more time and make another 3 explosions. But in my case, I just wanted to loop through once and only 3 times. And I'm also going to add a little test.wait because otherwise it's going to instantly spawn all 3 explosions. It's not going to really look that different, but with a slight delay, you get a cool little effect. And I missed. See that? 3 explosions. But there's something missing, I think, and that's some sounds. So let's go ahead and try to find a sound. Okay, guys, I finally found an explosion, a sound effect. All of them are very loud, so I picked something that sounded closer to fireworks. So in sound service, just add a sound. We're gonna call it explosion. And make sure in the audio content you paste your ID that you found. And I'm gonna go back in here. When it makes the part, we're gonna say game.soundservice.explosion play, and hopefully, look at that, pretty cool. All right, so that's the end of this fun tutorial on how to make a cake grenade. It's pretty fun, I think, to just make fun things, and just learn along the way. And of course, if anything was confusing here, please leave a comment. I'll try to answer you as quick as I can. And of course, you can always join our Discord and ask questions there, or DM me or otherwise. But as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.